All right, thank you so much for that introduction, Krista. Welcome everyone to our session. We're so happy to see so many of you with us today. So our session is really focused on what happens when a faculty member comes to you for help and enthusiasm, and there's just no great fit OER out there for them. So we're going to be taking a look at this from each of our different roles and perspectives on our different institutions. So depending on what role you have on your campus, some of these might hit a little close to home. I'm going to be talking though about how to help folks when this happens from the librarian's perspective. Now, during our session, if you have ideas that you want to share with others around, what to do when you've hit that wall, and we do have an answer garden set up where you can type in your ideas to share with others throughout the presentation, and we'll be sure to include a link to those embedded in our slides so that you can all access them, from the recording or from the slides later on. So I'm going to go ahead and drop that in the chat. Oh, perfect! It's already been done. Thank you so much. Okay, awesome. So this is going to be sort of like a little lightning round. We're going to go really fast through each of our profiles and introduce ourselves. My name is Christina Springfield. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I'm an OER librarian and coordinator of our Affordable Learning Solutions program at California State University, Dominguez Hills, which is the traditional land of the Tonga people. And so some tips from the librarian perspective. I know when faculty come to me and they're so excited and I do a search and I really do my best and it doesn't work out, I feel a sense of failure and imposter syndrome. So if that's ever happened to you, know that that's normal and it's okay to acknowledge those feelings. One thing that's really helped me though in these situations is thinking about how to turn this transaction into an opportunity to build a relationship. And so really talking with faculty around what their options are and taking off the pressure of having to adopt something right away. So often faculty, again, they're excited, they're enthusiastic, they're looking for next semester, but sometimes that's just not realistic. And so turning it into a conversation about what's a realistic timeline for adopting or creating an OER means maybe we're going to look out for 2 semesters or 3 semesters, or maybe we should start thinking about when is your next textbook review cycle in your department. And then we can build in what the plan might be that gives us so many more options to think about. My next tip is beyond the repositories to tap your colleagues that have put together such wonderful resources. So things like listservs, I've listed some of the ones that I'm a part of that I have found just so incredibly helpful. People are so willing to share. Or I've also seen folks create local listservs or Google groups for particular niche areas that might be typically hard to find materials. And there's an example I've been added to that's a K-12 education curriculum for undergraduate students studying K-12 education. And those can be really great communities to become a part of. Another tip, I know as librarians are really great at curating resources and often for our local contexts. So just doing a Google advanced search for library pages that talk about whatever subject you're looking for, that topic in OER, I've come across some incredible curated research guides that are out there where I've been able to find things that didn't pop up in any of the other repositories. And finally, reaching out for help. It's okay. Look for at a school that has a similar program to the one that you're looking for. Reach out to the faculty or the librarians there. And we tend to be a very welcoming community. My next tip is to ask faculty if they're familiar with the concept of open pedagogy. And I find this is a great conversation starter. Again, we're thinking about building those relationships. So if they haven't heard about it, I know at least in my context, it seems to be a little less recognized than OER. Sharing that knowledge, sharing some examples, and connecting them with institutional instructional designers on your campus if you have those available to you. That's a great way to get the conversation started though. And lastly, my tip is that sometimes you're just planting the seeds. And even if you don't find that perfect OER, you're establishing that relationship. You can point them to other alternatives like library licensed resources that, again, they're not OER, they're not really what we're striving for, but it's moving them in a step direction. And you'll be able to continue that relationship on with them later. I maintain a spreadsheet of failed OER searches for faculty so that I can rerun those searches every 6 months or so and talk with others around when new resources are coming out so that they can be the first to know. So my last tip is just, it's okay. It may bloom later on. And just by having this dialogue, you're well on your way to making it a success down the line. I'm going to go ahead and pass this along to my colleague, Cyril.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sorrel Oberlander. I'm the Library Dean at Humboldt State University and a longtime advocate for library publishing. So in so many ways, this running into the wall is really the greatest opportunity there is. So if I can get to the next slide, I'll share that essentially when we do workshops with faculty, they're hands-on workshops in a lab, a computer lab, and we describe Creative Commons, we describe OER. So we're essentially helping them search OERs for their searches, not our searches. And then we have them evaluate at least one resource using a Google form rubric that helps them think about accessibility and other things. And from there, we move to searching the library resources. If they can't find anything, then after all of that, it's the best time to be creative. Usually they find something, but not surprisingly, there are areas where there isn't sufficient material. So what do we do about it? Next slide and you'll see. So I think the key here is we're really, you can go back one slide. It's really a call for authors or alternatives. Wow, I think we're one more back. It's a call for authors and reviewing and that peer process. A lot of times when we're working with faculty, they're very familiar with things like a call for authors. So the best part of hitting a wall is really talking about the opportunity to distinguish that faculty member's work or their department. Most of our disciplines want to be a significant brand. And the best thing about it is if you're the first OER in that area, you represent a brand. So let's go forward and empower our faculty and co-create with our students. And I'll talk about how to do that. So next slide, and thank you, Christina. There is too many easy ways to really create and publish. There's a lot of alternative textbook assignment projects. They're listed on Cool for Ed. You could use Google Document. You can use Wikipedia edit-a-thons, which are super fun. You invite people to edit something together. Or you could create Wikibooks or WordPress. We do internships as well to create OER objects. Next slide. But the thing we really like to share with our faculty members is we're there for them. They can publish in Canvas. It's a little bit constrained unless they use Canvas Commons. But we are a press at HSU Library. We created HSU Press and we share the submission guidelines and we encourage them because we're able to provide the support that they need in order to publish. Now, we also show them how to author in OER Commons because that's a very powerful tool as well. And we also say there's WordPress, which is pretty exciting for not only the faculty members, but the students. When the students are authoring in WordPress, they have an incredible digital literacy that takes them wherever they want to go. If we could do the next slide. But a lot of times we have to be very specific with faculty about lesson plans. If we're talking about creating a course that encourages developing an OER, we give them a sample lesson plan like this one. Now, it usually has diagrams and fun things like that, which is essentially you create groups, you ask them each to write a specific article or chapter of a textbook. You have them do peer review so they finally really understand, oh my gosh, that's what peer review is? Yep, that's exactly what it is. It's an amazing opportunity to network and learn from each other. You can do all of this in Google folders and Google Drive and easy to work with. But then what we say is you can then take your class assignment and publish with us, and we support that. But don't think it's overnight. You could think of a workbook first, and a couple iterations later, it's a textbook. So we're there either for a capstone class, internships, or colleague networks. Now I think the last slide. It doesn't come easy though. So we did hire a scholarly communications librarian. He's amazing, Kyle Morgan. And we began the HSU Press, and we have various funding sources, but we also fundraise. So HSU Press actively fundraises, and we actually have authors funding library scholar internships to help the publication model. Last month, we had our first endowed library scholar internship focused on publishing. And our intent is starting January, we are launching an exciting endowment campaign to fund a position for HSU Press and Special Collections. In all of this, I want to iterate that there are great collaborative partners. You are all part of that, and I really appreciate you participating in this OER culture because it's about change, and thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brian Barrett, and I am a faculty member, professor of Deaf Studies at Fresno State. I also am the director for our Center for Faculty Excellence, and I also want to thank our co-presenters and our moderator, as well as all of you, especially on the East Coast, who are here during dinner time. And so we look forward to sharing some information with you today. The next slide, you'll see that Fresno State is part of the homelands of the Yokuts and Monos people, and like to do the land acknowledgement. And there are some fast facts about Fresno State. We are a Hispanic serving institution with a number of undergraduates and first-time freshmen from diverse communities and cultures. And so we're very grateful for our student engagement. And we have a very diverse faculty as well. And you'll see on the next slide, the number of response. I anticipate there are some of you here today who are faculty members. These are just a few of the things that I've experienced in my 22 years at Fresno State, first as a part-time lecturer, and then as I became tenured and full professor, department chair, and various leadership roles on campus. And so I love to put this in context in terms of our OER efforts, that when you think about sustainability, when you're thinking about how can you find some practical pathways, you have to have institutional support because faculty members simply do not have the time. If we're a lecturer, when I was a lecturer, I taught at 3 different campuses, 2 community colleges and the university. As a tenure track faculty member, you're typically working on your publications, your service, and other things. And then as you move into leadership roles, chair, professor, et cetera, they're always something that you are responsible to do. And so what we do at Fresno State is we create the infrastructure so that we have unique enablers. And you'll see that coming up with some bullet points. And I will just start with our administrators. So you have to have executive sponsors that are not only providing you the communication plan, and out there we have a very supportive president at Fresno State who touches on OER and touches on our affordable learning solution efforts across campus at each of his openings over the last 2 years, each semester, with faculty and staff. So when you have administrators at that level talking about this important effort and what it means to our students, I think it's very critical. Certainly our students are the focal point. We have 70% of our students have food insecurities at Fresno State. We do have a lot of rural communities in the surrounding area. And so there are lots of programs that we've developed over the years. And one of the things that I always like to highlight is the fact that we use ADKAR as a change management. So there's certainly lots of different change management types of models. ADKAR is one, actually it's ProSci out of the Chancellor's Office. Fresno State is part of the 23 campuses in the CSU system. And so we're very fortunate that we use this processes to continually improve and scaffold what we're doing. We're also very exceptionally supported by our bookstore and also our librarian OER fellow. And if you could move to the next slide, you'll see our campus goal. And this again is something that is shared widely by campus administrators. So as a department chair, I was very fortunate to get a very modest professional development stipend to create an OER course. And so even though there weren't OERs readily available in my discipline in Deaf Studies, I was able to secure a mini grant and actually was able to involve community members in the development of the content for one of our courses. And that content is still leveraged today. So we're very fortunate. Again, at Fresno State, this is viewed as a social justice issue. We want to be inclusive of all of our students. And I know just prior to us starting, there was a brief discussion on the importance of ensuring that the content is accessible. So we also have a very strong Universal for Design program in our Center for Faculty Excellence for all of our faculty members. And if you move on to see some of our planning and structure, we are very fortunate to be able to provide funding to faculty members. So we have some significant funding with milestones for faculty members. We focus primarily on large GE courses with high DWFs, where faculty members can work with our OER faculty fellow, who is Dr. Mario Benuelos, who's a math faculty who's created content for all of his courses on his own. So he's leveraged other OER content and then created it. Our campus currently is focused on a zero cost pathway through general education, as well as a 1-degree program we're working with the liberal studies department. Additionally, once you get this slide deck, I really encourage you to click the Be a Hero campaign that we have at Fresno State, which involves our students, our administrators, our faculty, and you can hear our provost and soon to be interim president speak about the value of OER and considering our students' needs. And if we can move to the last slide that I have, I believe, you'll see here are some of our efforts. And I think the most important thing that I'd like to highlight here, again, is this notion of building and then leveraging the campus infrastructure that we've built over the years. And we've been very fortunate to do so. We have incredible buy-in from our deans, from our library dean, in addition, our provost and president, as I've mentioned, our 2 OER fellows, one is a librarian, one is a faculty fellow. And then I'll also highlight, we've been very fortunate. We had over 800 faculty, and again, we're a campus of about 25,000 students with about 1,500 faculty, and we had 800 faculty go through training this summer. And it was a 20-hour training, and any of the training that we had included, they were required to explore OER content. They were required to leverage universal design for learning principles as they looked at course redesign in this virtual reality and COVID reality. So I'm going to stop there. Certainly willing to feel free to reach out to me. I'll put my email in the chat, and thank you all for your time.
Hi, I'm so glad to see so many of you, here. And obviously, this is a real need. And so I'm going to be kind of looking at a different angle on this. My name is Dr. Leslie Farmer, and I teach teacher librarians. There we go. So again, welcome folks. I teach teacher librarians and educational technology at California State University. And I also manage the ICT, that's Information and Communication Technology project for CSU, which is housed at Merlot. And that's what I'll be talking about, among other things. So while textbooks are kind of the low-hanging fruit, we want to make sure that folks think broadly about different opportunities for open education resources. So you can see a list: different articles, simulations, quizzes, videos, case studies, reference materials, assessments, all kinds of things. Next. And so why do we do that? Well, I think at this point it's sort of hubris to think that a textbook can have all the information and that it'll really work for all of your students. When you kind of broaden, the possible resources, both in terms of format and kind of the depth of content and different aspects of it, you have a larger pool to draw from. It enables students then to kind of like reach a comfortable level of understanding. There's those deep plungers, those that might need, a little more help in terms of English language, et cetera. And so again, you have different perspectives. So that's really important as well, so that we have a richer experience for all of our students. And they really like choice. So you've already heard of a lot of different places, even though we've been talking about hitting the wall, whether it's repositories within libraries, different kinds of collections like Merlot, merlot.org, and that in itself also links to a number of different repositories. You've also heard about listservs, professional organizations, library guides, all of those, and the databases too. And while most of those are subscription, our campus has a list of ones that are OERs. And again, you've already heard about faculty and student products. And I want you to think about also student and faculty research, because that can also be a really good OER. Next. So then how do we incorporate that? Well, you've also heard about that too. The best deal, I think, these days is to have a content expert, the librarian who's a resource expert, and the instructional designer as a team. And then starting out with what are your learning objectives, and then what are the activities and the resources then that will help students to kind of gain knowledge and practice, those skills. Because those OERs can be used as an introduction, as kind of a teaser, as a way to review, as a way to practice and apply work, as well as for assessment. And again, the more that we include our students in finding OERs and in generating them, then you are really modeling a community of learners.
One minute.
So what are your next steps and what are your questions?
Yes, I wanted to go ahead and bring up the answer garden too. And then other folks, if you have questions, you want to drop them in the chat or unmute yourself. And while you do that, I'll bring up the answer garden.
We do expect that the chat transcript will be available.
Okay, we've got some good ideas in here, I can see. Talking to the publisher, that's an interesting one. I don't know if any of my colleagues have done that before.
It's super fun. And usually they want to ignore you, but actually sometimes you can get a release of a publication. And especially if you know the author, they're the ones who are more likely to get a yes from their publisher. So copyright returning back to the author is a great way to do things.
And there are, publishers of OERs. So, that's really a rich thing. And if they, if you are able to fill in a gap, that's really super. They want that. So talk to them, especially at conferences.
And I saw there was a question around, have any of us found that offering lower cost alternatives makes people less interested in OER? I thought that's a really interesting question. I know at my previous institution, at one point, our bookstore was working on a rental program, which was fee-based, where every, student fees went towards renting textbooks, across the board for everyone. And in some ways, that I saw that as de-incentivized faculty, because everybody paid this price, no matter if a faculty member selected OER or not. But I've seen other instances where I'm just talking to faculty about low cost alternatives. Again, it feeds into this relationship building that may turn into them using an OER in the future. And I've seen that happen. So I didn't know if any of my colleagues had any other comments.
I think Cyril's comments that, faculty like having, sort of the wraparound services, for textbooks, that's why they kind of choose them. But I would challenge folks to have their students create some wraparound services themselves to an OER.
Yeah, I agree. Ancillary material seems to be a big sticking point for a lot of these. So I like the idea of getting students to create those. Yeah, so Justin said, if you've built the relationship, the interest never goes away. I would agree. And some of these other answers on Answer Garden include peer mentors. And that's interesting. Brian, maybe from the faculty perspective, is that something you've run into?
Our objective is actually to have an OER faculty expert in each of our 8 colleges. We're not there yet, but we also have engaged our associate students on campus, and they have really stepped up and having conversations with faculty.
I just want to repeat once more, Beatrice was talking about databases being so expensive. Again, there are a number of databases of OER, products. And again, our library actually has a separate slot for just, freely available ones. And if nothing else, start with Eric from the government.
The slides. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and drop the link to the slides in the chat. They're also though linked in schedule, not yet, but in a few minutes they should be linked in schedule too. And most of the presenters should be linking their things there in schedule as well.
Yes, thank you. So that is all the time we have. Now the speakers will hang out for another 5 or 10 minutes if you have a few questions, but I'm going to stop the recording at this time.